Buddy. It's good to be with you all. I have a wonderful guest star here with us. We have swayed from doing interviews. We don't really do many of them. Um, Oftentimes because they feel like regurgitated. It's another person promoting a book or a program or something like that. And so if I'm bringing someone for an interview, it's usually a special event. And this is an easy one for me to say yes to because I adore this human being. Um, I'm glad to say, in some respects, he feels like family, friend, spiritual guide, consultant. I mean, I don't know. Like the amount of weird stuff my wife and I have sent over the years to still to ask for guidance for when we're uncertain has been, a bunch of stuff, and it's always because of his unique perspective, not only with his gifts, but his unique perspective as a human being. So, as a quick intro for those of you guys who are newer to this wonderful human being, Asil. I mean, there are some human beings you meet, and you're like, okay, you've done a few rounds. Okay, so some of us are like old, and some of us are ancient, and then some of us are like we're here when the dirt was formed, like on the planet. They're like as old as dirt. I mean that in the spiritual sense, not in the physical or energetic sense, because this man has a lot of energy. But it still makes an impression on you because his wisdom comes from these ancient streams. He's someone who seems to have been on a spiritual path for a very, very long time, and in this life, the way that that's expressed itself is as an incredible channel and healer who I'm very proud to say we've worked with extensively. My wife, I mean, out of all the work that we've ever done, I feel like she is most aligned with your particular form of the work, Asil. And she just did the sacred earth healers or sacred earth practitioners. Correct me on that one.
Yeah, it used to be Sacred Earth Practitioners. Now we call them Earth Keepers. Yeah.
Earth keepers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my wife is definitely an earth mama. And so like, even since that work, I've seen like
Yay.
major shifts in how my wife operates in this world, a groundedness, a patience and stuff like that. And so he's always putting out these beautiful offerings. And so in the top left corner there, you guys will see a QR code. You can scan it with your phone. And if you cannot scan it with your phone because you're watching this on your phone, let me just put this up real quick if I can. Excuse me for my lack of knowledge sometimes with these. Here we go. So down below, you can go to soulsandseekers.com/Asil, and that will take you to a new offering that is starting here in 4 days, actually, called Becoming a Conscious Creator. I'm going to be doing that. My wife's going to be doing that. And if you are at all curious about sitting with Asil, it's quite the experience. I mean, I have had, sorry, so I will let you talk, but there's going to be a long-winded
No,
intro because,
I'm loving this. This
yeah,
is the best intro I've ever heard.
first of all, clearly I love this man. Okay. But what I want to tell you is I have like, when I was a kid, people get excited about movie stars and people get excited about musicians, and I love house music. So for me, it was always DJs. That time in my past is phased now. Now it's just like everyone's a DJ, so it's irrelevant to me. But not everyone's a channel, and I geek out about channels, and I have had just, I don't want to call it strange because I guess it's all kind of call it destiny, call it premeditated, call it spirituality, energy. I don't know, but throughout my life, channels have entered into my life. Yeah, and one of them I'm fairly reasonably certain saved my life at the age of 19 years old. I knew nothing of spirituality at the time. I had no idea about the profound nature of the human being that I sat in front of at that time. I don't even know if I ever told you that story. This woman named Sarah, quadriplegic, wildly gifted. I mean, there's probably like 4 of her on the planet at any given time holding the field. And this woman asked to see me. And I had this wild experience. I got no context for who she was. And I have this like sadness in my body that I don't get to see her today and acknowledge who she was, even though I know in the field she's receiving that anyway. So throughout my life, I've met really a lot of different channels who've helped me sort through things, who've taught me things, who've guided me. And Asil's brand, in my opinion, is really unique. And I don't mean that in a business sense. I mean, like the energy he brings through is unique. And so for those of you guys who are interested in his programs, but want to get a taste of what he does, you can even jump on YouTube just type in Asil Toksal, right?
Hmm.
Right?
Or Evolution One. Yeah.
Or Evolution One, and you'll find him. He does a ton of free content, but it's not about the fact that it's free. It's about you having an experience of sitting with him. And so if you sit, and I just offer, close your eyes, meditate if that's what you wish to do, or just become present with yourself, you will find yourself in a rather unique experience as Sil goes into his channeling experiences. And it's both auditory and it's both an energetic transmission. And the energetic transmissions are wildly potent. I mean, like right up there with some psychedelic experiences that I've had. And so I'll leave it at that. We'll kind of get into a little bit of conversation here. We didn't really have any plan in mind of where to go. But yeah, I just wanted to bring you on the floor, admire you, and tell you I love you, and always an honor to be here with you and speak to you. And so, even though we're formally doing an interview, I'm just happy we're spending some time together.
I feel the same way. Thank you so much. This was definitely the most eloquent and most beautifully framed intro I've ever had. It's like, wow, refreshing.
Because I love you, man. It's easy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Guy. I love you guys too. It's, it's really interesting to me to connect with you and also with your wife and Ilan, and feel how you guys have been serving humanity, and also witness over the years the way it's been evolving, the way it's been shifting. And that speaks volumes about how much you guys care about what you deliver and to which level of integrity and precision and purity you deliver it. Because you work on yourself so much. Like, there's very few people I know that are so dedicated to self-growth and transformation, like the three of you that I've personally experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like every conversation is a transformational conversation with you guys.
Sure.
Every moment is like an opportunity to go deeper, to look under, oh, what's going on there? Or did I choose the right word to say? Or is there a better word to say with a different frequency? Or what does it relate to in my being? So it's really amazing to have this connection with you guys and also witness each other's evolution over time and our service to the world. So it's always a pleasure to be here with you and connect with you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm unclear where that motivation comes from. I also have to, for my own inquiries into that, I have to say that desire comes from a place that I have a difficulty describing, and also seems to be some kind of lineage. I don't want to say I'm forced into it, but it's like I signed a contract long ago, and I'm to some degree energetically bound by these agreements that I seem to have made over many, many lifetimes. And it's just like, man, sometimes walking the path is not so easy, in terms of life, of how it shows up in physical world, life circumstances. And then like every time I'm like, well, is it worth it? There's something in the system that's always like, yep, just keep going, man. Like no matter what happens, just keep walking the path, keep doing the thing. And I agree. I don't find many people who have that level of dedication, and it's not wrong or bad, because we can all dedicate our lives to whatever we choose to do that with. But I'm glad to have landed in a community of people who seem to have that strong desire. And I find people who do this type of work to be extremely courageous. It seems to be much easier to spend your lifetime avoiding or maybe not. That's actually not true, because it's going to show up this way or that way and try to impede on your life. But I from stories I've heard from you, I've heard you do just acts of massive courage in places that you've been and places that you've served and stuff like that. And so I guess just to kind of bring us to some place where we land in this conversation, like At least from what I know that you've been up to, you've been to a lot of sites all over the world where intense violence occurred, and you helped to kind of move the energy and help the energy move through. And that was really, really profound. You kind of had like a mini documentary set up, and my wife and I watched that, which was really cool.
Did you have
But
any
like, what
favorites?
do I have any favorites? Was
If you
it?
remember scenes or specifics?
I remember Kosovo
Yeah,
leaving an impression on me
that was strong.
because of the beauty there. It was
Mm,
again like it's this weird juxtaposition you and I were talking about before we got on, of like world events and then like what world events create. But you see this like unbelievably beautiful place, like
mm,
gorgeous, where you just like such intense violence happened in this exact location where this
mhm.
gorgeousness has occurred. And that's true if you like, go to Germany or Poland and you go to Warsaw and you see all these different places and you're like, these are such gorgeous places. It's almost hard to imagine that like
Mhm.
this dark thing happened here.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I know that that was a really big part for you, but like, what's top of mind for you? Like, what feels really important right now? What feels like where you're really enjoying serving? What's going on over there?
Let's see.
Let's say top of heart, not top of mind.
Yeah. It's my life changed the moment I dedicated my life to service rather than trying to find a business or work or career or anything that like humanity had imposed onto me or I thought I wanted, like from a thinking place. I started to feel more like, what is my soul trying to tell me?
Mm-hmm.
How to serve in this reality, in this human form? How can I make every living day that I have, every living breath that I have, dedicated to my own evolution and to the evolution of humanity? And the moment a person makes that choice, a couple things will start to happen. Spirit will align with you, and your soul will align with you,
Yeah,
and then it will drive you to shape you to become the best vessel you can be. And that shaping and that driving is the driving force that you mentioned earlier that drives us through transformational processes. And it's really fascinating. It's not like, oh, I do all this transformational work and then I'll be in service. The moment you say you decide to be in service, the transformational work starts to come in.
sure.
And it's very, very strong. It's inevitable. You cannot push it away. You can't even focus on anything else because it's so strongly in your field, in your presence. And then we have to address it. We have to look into it. And in some ways, that's what I did. And I was very dedicated to coming to an understanding of what am I here to do as a human being? Why am I here? Why am I serving? And how can I make this truly a gift to myself and to humanity? And with that commitment, interesting things started to happen. One of
Sure.
which is the connection to the guides, and them working on me to shape me into a vessel that can operate and deliver, these transmissions, these transformations, and then being sent to different places around the world to assist with the attunements that the earth requires.
Mm-hmm.
Because the earth serves all living beings, right? But if there is heavy energies that are parked or remnant from the past in different areas of the world, then the earth's service to humanity is impeded upon. And it is the movement of energy slowed down in these areas. Now, of course, over time, it will clear itself, but with conscious attention, we can actually make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's probably a lot of people listening in that are grid workers or have visited a lot of sacred sites, you know the difference of frequency that a place holds. Right? You can go to a church or to a mosque or to a synagogue that is very high frequency. You can go to the same type of temple and it's very low frequency and dark, right? You can go to a place in nature that feels incredibly vibrant. You can go to a place in nature that is feeling heavy or awkward or weird in a certain sense.
Yeah.
And in that way, once you start to dive deeper into this sensitivity, you navigate energetic spaces and fields with more conscious awareness. And then we can adjust how we can bring our presence to change the energy and the frequency that's held in that field. And that goes, once you extrapolate that further, it goes to, in my case, past conflict zones, places of genocide, mass graves, um, or places of incredible energetic power, from volcanoes to mountain ranges to temples, ancient sites of civilizations. So there is a lot of opportunity to bring ourself to make a difference in that way. Now, that's, one sliver of the work, and it's the one that's maybe most flashy
Yeah.
in some ways, because people can see things and they're like, oh, he is right now at this place, or he's in the Balkans, or he is, dealing with these kind of dark energies or liberating souls. It's, in a spiritual sense, it's flashy, quote unquote. But there is a process that everyone as an individual that serves in this way has to go through.
Mm.
We have to do some form of clearing. We have to do some form of capacity building. We have to do some form of stabilization and purification, so that when we do this kind of work, we're not impacted negatively. So when I'm going to, a place of genocide, I'm not taking down, I'm not destabilized by doing the work.
And is this kind of the case? I mean, macro, micro, right? Like my experience with interpersonal healing work is also it requires attuned awareness, to call it human being, an attuned human to witness a person who's going through we'll call it dysfunction. It's not the right word, but some sort of misalignment. And in that process of awareness, something begins to shift for the person that's being witnessed.
Yes.
That's feeling this. It's basically nervous system sending energetic attunement to a system that's out of tune, so to speak, and it helps that regulate. And so when I hear you say that, I hear that just like the consciousness of an area or the consciousness of the planet also requires like a witness to regulate itself so that it can clear the energy. Would that be, I don't want to say accurate, but kind of in the same realm?
It's definitely in the same vein. It's definitely in the same realm of operation. And also, you know how it is. So the type of cases or circumstances you deal with in one-on-one sessions can be very extreme cases,
Sure.
right? So it could be heavy human trauma that you have to witness without losing your center.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even possible that there is energies present that you're projected onto, right? So how do you hold your center? How do you hold your alignment, your grounding, and your openness at the same time
Correct.
while you're witnessing this person, and while potentially their energy is trying to connect or somehow find a loophole in your system to destabilize you, right? So it's in that same vein that we as practitioners have to consistently develop and consistently find even a stronger alignment within to be able to witness the most atrocious, the most difficult things of a human experience
Mm-hmm.
without it taking us into a destabilized place.
Mm-hmm.
There is, of course, a bit more nuance to it, and there is more, you know, expanded practices to deal with different kinds of situations, as you know, like more specializations. And I think in the early beginning journey that anyone does as a practitioner, you're learning to find a slightly better alignment than you had before, a stronger state of being of your, let's call it, status quo.
Mm-hmm.
And that baseline can change over time. You've witnessed that with yourself. You've witnessed that with Mandy, right? With your
Sure.
brother. So
Sure.
that baseline changes over time. And our conscious decision and our conscious effort is towards really establishing that baseline and making it stronger and stronger and stronger. Then we can address more and more difficult and challenging situations, circumstances, or healings.
Why do you think? Why do you think it's important? It's going to make me almost tear up a little bit.
Mm,
Um, why do you think it is important for us to be able to sit and experience some of these extraordinarily difficult, even violent, existential type of things? Like I can only tell you from my ayahuasca experiences. When I normally share what I go through in ayahuasca, the question the other person has for me is, "Why do you do that?" And because of the type of violence, whether it's in past life or genocides or even existential things that I have seen that are hard to make sense of sometimes.
mm,
And when I ask the other side, why are you showing this to me? Like, why am I being given these messages, these visions? It often says the same thing. It says, because you can. Like the system has the capacity to run that flow of energy.
mm,
And so I'm like, my human brain goes, this is fucking unfair. I'm watching everybody else be little bliss junkies over there, right? Like enjoy this gorgeous beauty. And I can't say I've never had those experiences. I've had plenty of them. Having said that, my system seems to, whether it's conditioning or patterning in this life of just being this like enduring pattern
mm,
and being able to endure great amount of strife, pain, emotional, physical, visual, but to the same extent, right, I agree with you, and like building a capacity to hold. But even in today's world where we're seeing war, where we're seeing so much upheaval, and I think this is part of a massive change, right? Like we're going through an existential change as humanity right now, and whether you want to be part of it or not, like hang on to your butts, it's coming, right? Like why has that been so necessary for us to face and seemingly face over and over again for such a long period of time?
mm. So there's a couple pieces there that I want to elaborate on. One is we go through human experiences that are intense on many different layers, and we go through the roller coasters of life as a human being, right? So some people go through more intense experiences in this lifetime. Some people go through what's perceived from the outside, maybe less intense experiences, but their individual subjective experience is still intense, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
everyone goes through challenge, and the Buddha says life is suffering, right? So that's one piece.
Yeah.
So in some ways, through the challenge, human consciousness or the individual soul evolves,
Hmm.
right? So there's an evolutionary process that happens that's been happening for thousands of years. Through challenge, we learn, we evolve, we, you know, create a new generation, and the new generation evolves in a different way. For those few that are choosing to be in service, I almost imagine it to be like we are in the front lines,
Hmm.
right? You're in the front lines of consciousness evolution or consciousness transformation.
Let's do it the
You
same
have to deal with some of the most controversial, some of the most polarized energies of light and dark. Your capacity to witness a great light or be able to hold a great light has to be equally matched with the amount of darkness that it correlates to. You can't have one without the other.
Sure.
And in some ways, capacity builds on both ends. So, from many practitioners that you have seen, some of the most powerful practitioners have had some of the most gruesome and challenging lives.
100%.
They were just able to transform that experience into something that integrated and allowed them to be in service. Some people in the beginning of their journey are becoming in service is a compensation for something that they experienced. But over time, hopefully, that evolves into a more centralized piece of I'm serving from a place of alignment, no longer in compensation for the trauma I've had. When you go through your darkness experiences and your medicine ceremonies or other types of upgrades, I see it as an acceleration of your development and also an acceleration and expansion of your capacity. Yes, because you can,
Agreed. Yeah.
first, because you can. And second, because when you face these kind of energies in the wild or in healings or in places that you go to, then your system will not be shocked in the moment of that experience because it has already experienced it. In some ways, you could compare it to the trainings of special operations
Sure.
or people that are in the Navy SEALs, right?
Sure.
They have to go through very intense forms of training. So when they're in the field, they don't have a visceral or immediate shock response of their system, witnessing something that they didn't in their training, and suddenly they're completely useless in the front lines,
Right.
meaning they're toast. And in our practice, of course, we think about energy healers as like, the crystal swinging, white clothes, and
Totally.
beautiful music background. And, you have the singing bowls and everything is like, so beautiful and so on. But some of the energies we have to face are intense and very, very potent. So, how do you face these energies? Is by practicing and moving through some of these heavy pieces in our consciousness, but also our collective consciousness and our ancestral consciousness. And I've had experiences like you shared before. I had to go through thousands of individuals of my ancestry. I had to go through anywhere from 10 to 20 to 30 generations back in my ancestry to clean things up. And I
Yeah.
was like, this is insane. And why do I have to do this?
Yeah.
And they were like, because you can, because you're the one that has developed this far. And if you do not clear this up, it will continue to affect you. Aside from the fact that it's affecting everyone that's, in my field or people that are in this lineage, but it's our healing is the healing of the collective. And the more intense or the more potent your healing processes are, the greater the impact and the healing you're providing for yourself and those around you. So I hear you on the fact that, sometimes it's too much and
Yeah.
sometimes it feels unfair and sometimes it feels unbalanced with what others have to go through.
Sure.
But here we are.
And we see that everywhere, whether it's a spiritual journey or your lessons are more in the physical. Yeah, I mean, what I hear, and I guess like it's partly disappointment, partly like, yeah, obviously, time is nonlinear. It seems to be this, a circle might be a more accurate representation of what time is. Um, but what I hear is it's like we're not on this journey to like, Buddhism was about alleviating all suffering, right? Buddhism is about alleviating suffering, but it's like, okay, are we always going to use this to learn? Or is there an easeful place that humanity finally turns the page and says, you know what, we can learn from this easeful place? And I say this even from my own interpersonal experiences. Like I know I add challenge into my life,
Mhm.
whether consciously or unconsciously. Like there's these patterns, right? These energetic loops. However, having said that, I know when I sit with like a teacher, like a really profound, energetic teacher, and sometimes there's no content. Like I have no upset in my life. I'm in this really beautiful place, and we can sit there just shooting the shit, laughing hysterically, making lewd jokes while in awareness, right?
Mhm.
And at first I used to think this is a waste of time. I'm here with this brilliant teacher. I should tell him about challenges in my life and we should get to work.
Mhm.
But over the years, I came to understand that when I am in a state of well-being
Mhm.
and my system is open and relaxed,
Mhm.
that is the time where my system can actually do the most amount of work,
Yes.
like the most amount of energy, because it's like either a tight fist or a loose fist, right? Like which one's going to get the energy moving through easier. And so there's this idea, I think, in the healing community of like, we got to get in there and like look in the weeds. And there are times where that's appropriate. Like you do an immersive experience. You're
Sure.
like, all right, I'm going to put on the war paint. I'm going to fucking get in there and I'm going to do this thing. And for the next 3 days, like,
Mhm.
ugh. But then there's like the also realizing it doesn't always have to look this way. I can just be in this super relaxed, fun position. And more is actually clearing from my system. And I'm wondering, are we trying to get to this place where I make this mistake all the time? I think I do my work, I should be rewarded. I'm clearing myself. Like, when does the reward come? When does it get easy? When do the finances flow? When do the relationships never have challenges? When do people stop pissing me off, right? Or whatever it might be. Uh, you could see, you could tell I've had all those things, right? And have all those things in my life. But, um, is that just mind, from your perspective, is that just a mind trick? Are we forever going to be on this path of the pendulum swinging back and forth? We might move to a more utopian society and then more to like a dark period or whatever it might be. Or are we really on a journey that eventually leads to some place, whether now or deep into the future, where everyone is in this really easeful place and we're continuing to evolve,
Mhm.
but it doesn't have to be through these really, dark, negative, ugly type of scenarios and situations?
Yeah. So, as I said earlier, and I'm glad you asked about this because this is a fantastic topic. There's many ways to process the challenges we've had. And yes, the human experience requires a consciousness evolution, which currently happens through experiencing challenges and learning from challenges and having what the guides call realizations. And if, as we have realizations, it integrates into our being, and that realization is complete. Now we're dealing with other realizations that are possibly bigger and more, could be on an individual level, but could be on a collective level, right? And we've been going through this for cycles and cycles and cycles, right? There are ways to process the unprocessed of the past. Some of these ways are mental, as you mentioned. Some of these ways are emotional, and some of these ways are somatic, physical. There's also ways to process things that are happening more on a consciousness level. And this is really fascinating because I used to always be from that department of mental and emotional transformation. And I come from that, like my first really potent experiences were, um, personal transformational processes that really changed my life.
Sure.
And here I am sitting with the guides in the most non-dual and purest spaces that I can find myself in presence. And I can't even formulate a thought.
Hmm.
And I can't even formulate a challenge that I may be experiencing. I'm in a present moment of complete bliss.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering, how is this serving me? And how is this serving humanity? And so, as you said earlier, when we enter these states, something happens from that place of non-duality. A lot of processing occurs. It's almost like the tightness and the tension that requires a certain manifestation to happen so that we learn is loosened. And from that loosening and from that higher vantage point of perspective, there is a processing, a clearing, and the realization that happens that is significantly more gentle, that is significantly more effective. Now, we are learning to process through consciousness. We're learning to come to realizations through these states of non-duality. And then you might say, well, that's good for me, but how is this going to serve the people that are never meditating or that will never watch a guy channeling, angelic beings? Like, how is that going to help them? But there is a field that we create. Our change impacts the
Sure.
other people around us,
Sure.
right? We start to create a different state of being, and our presence starts to impact other people around us. Just because we walk differently, we talk differently, and we act differently.
Mm-hmm.
So we are evolving into a place where we do not have to recreate the challenges of the past in order to learn. And how cool is that? Who doesn't want that? Like, do I want to go through another, experience of being, witch hunted? Do I want to go through another experience of being tortured? Do I want to go through an experience of being at war again? No, I don't. Like, consciously, I'm not wanting that. But reality says, well, this stuff needs to be processed, my friend. And your soul came here to learn stuff. So how do you like to learn?
Giddy up.
Right.
Yeah.
So one way is doing it the same way that we used to. And we see enough of that in the world.
Yeah.
The other way is getting into these states where we can start to transform some of these elements and come to realizations through consciousness. And I don't have to necessarily think about all the challenges, like you said, with your teacher, right? I don't have to think about, oh, this is my challenge and this is my challenge, and I want to transform that and I want to change this way of being.
Sure.
It starts to sink in from that place of peace that we find, and the transformation starts to happen on those pieces. Some people could say, well, you're bypassing. Not necessarily. There is a way of bypassing
Agreed.
that is existent in spiritual teachings and spiritual communities where people are like, nah, I don't want you to talk about war because, we're having a good time here, right? So you are bringing low frequency into this mix.
Yeah.
Someone that's not bypassing would be able to listen without losing their center,
Right.
would be able to stay in a place of compassion and understanding that other perspective without necessarily being pulled into a polarization. If you compartmentalize, if you bypass, the polar energy still exists.
That's right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
When it's integrated and realized, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
The only thing that exists is a perspective. So, can I hold perspectives? How do I hold perspectives? And how many perspectives can I hold at the same time
Absolutely.
without losing my center? And so that's kind of like the work that I'm seeing. And also, it is a great opportunity for us to go through transformational processes and through learnings and through evolutionary processes without having to manifest the crazy stuff we have been doing.
Yeah.
Now, we still see that in the world, and some cycles have had so much momentum on like a collective level that I don't think we can just stop them. I think some of these are just moving freight trains, right? But I do believe that some of these movements can be slowed down or in some ways accelerated with minimal damage. And other things can completely be transformed so that we don't really have to manifest them.
Yeah.
But it requires individuals like you and your wife and Ilan to do the work that you're doing and the way you're serving others to be able to do their work right? So that we start to affect the fields around us in our communities, in our families, in our countries, and it starts to shift from there. We are already seeing some of that. It's not all dark and bleak out there.
I couldn't agree more. I would actually argue that there's much more light than there is darkness today. I think there's centralized darkness. I think, like you said, there's momentum in systems that have relied so heavily on that energy for so long that they will take any infraction, zoom on it, and bring it and broadcast to the world and see like, hey, this is happening everywhere. And it's like, it's happening there, but it's not happening everywhere. I even think the conversation about division in the United States is way overblown and hyperbolized. And it's like, you go meet your average human being, you will find that they care about the same things you care about. They want their family, they want their safety, they want their well-being, they want their autonomy, like that. These are universal human principles. And regardless of what faith you grew up in, what culture you grew up in, fundamentally, every human being on the planet cares about these things deeply. I have found over our work, certainly in the last closer to the decade, I would say, that like people have an art. It's funny. It's like when we don't know what question to ask, we don't know how to look for the answers. And the question I don't think most people have come to is, or at least the realization is, that we have conditioned ourselves to not feel safe. And I don't mean like mental safety. I mean like nervous system, energetic awareness, safety. Like you don't feel safe in your body. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily what's happening in the world. I think that's part of how human development is currently being perpetrated and has been for a very, very long time. And that, to me, feels like a lot of the changes that are happening because of the way parents want to parent today, some of which is being stifled by the way we've organized society. And so, the first thing it needs to be is we need to recognize, hey, we haven't been really cultivating children. We've been raising them like they're cattle. And once you have that realization, you start realizing there are things in this world that need to change, and maybe even sacrifices that this generation needs to make about how we work or how we show up for our kids and stuff like that, which in retrospect, even sacrifice is too strong of a word. There's just a need for a human being and how they are to be received in this world to feel safe. And if you have a society of people that are walking around with this unconscious feeling of a lack of safety, you can start understanding why violence becomes a means to an end for people, or why somebody grabs a gun and mass murders when they've lived in isolation internally their whole lives, even if externally they're connected to a lot of people. And I know that too. Like my depression, I had all these people around me. On paper, I had these amazing parents, but like I had this insane upheaval, like you had mentioned, when I was a teenager, to a point where like you would have thought I was this like massively abused child who had experienced all these hardships, which was really not the case in my life circumstances. But internally, I mean, you couldn't tell me that wasn't the case.
Right.
Yeah, and just to kind of like parlay from there and make a bit of a right turn here, so I spoke about my admiration for channels. And I think part of that admiration comes from this idea in my head. And to some extent, we're all channeling, right? Like, I think some people have a different way of articulation, but I'm noticing as I loosen and surrender in my body, channeling experiences seem to get closer to me. Part of this process, I think that's difficult for a lot of people, is when you have certain experiences, it's like no one can verify it for you. You have to self-verify constantly. Did that really happen? Yeah, I guess it did, right? Like, and the more you allow, and you're like, it doesn't really matter if you thought it, if you felt it, if you think it, like it's a real experience for you. It's one of the top things I tell people when we go do medicine. I'm like, a lot of crazy shit's going to happen down here. Like stuff that's wild beyond your wildest dreams. I'm like, when it's all said and done, you're going to want to know if this was real.
Right.
And there's nobody that can come and tell you that it is. But from my experience, I'm telling you, if you self-verify, you self-validate, and you actually build that as a skill, these lessons will transcend and come with you. My question, though, is for you, as I live under this perhaps disillusionment, that people who have this resource that you have, which is to, be spoken through by what I perceive as what's on the other side of the veil. We call them angels, but let's say a different dimension of consciousness that's free of time and space, that seems to be connected to the great cloud computer in the sky, and have all this wonderful information. I feel like part of my driving force to desire that in my own life is a sense of certainty that it provides.
Mhm.
And I've always been curious about that, like when you're getting these kind of transmissions and something is speaking through you, does that calm down the human and say, hey, look, the connection is here.
Mhm.
I know it's here because I verify it every day through my interpersonal experience. I think a lot of us are missing and desiring that connection so badly. And as many experiences as I had where God's like raised his hand and been like, yo, bro, I'm right here, man. Like here it is again. Here's the support. Here's it is. In the next moment, my human kicks in and starts invalidating it and looking for more evidence. And it's like it can never be satiated, is what it feels like. And
Mm.
it feels like it will never be satiated unless I have this kind of like direct communion that I can rely on all the time. And so that's my curiosity. Like when you're part of an experience like this, do you feel like it to some extent is an advantage that gives you this certainty about faith that maybe some of us are lacking or desiring to have?
Excellent question.
It's a big question.
Yes, excellent question. So the connection with the guides, an externalized power, an externalized source of information, has helped me to trust more in existence. 100%. Also get guidance or direction at moments where I couldn't really choose or decide properly.
Say more about that. What do you mean you couldn't choose or decide properly?
Imagine you have options
Hmm.
and your mind wants a certain thing, your heart wants a certain thing, your body wants a certain thing. They're all kind of pointing in different directions, and you're
Sure.
sitting in front of like 5 options, and you're like, I don't really know how to choose.
Hmm.
What do I listen to? Some people say, oh, yeah, listen to logic and rationale. Some people say, listen to your heart. Some people say, listen to your body. And I found while all of these pathways are valid pathways, I found the greatest peace in in the beginning listening to this guidance that I was getting.
Hmm.
And that helped me in the beginning to establish a certain level of trust. But it also has a tendency to externalize power so much that that I felt, am I becoming dependent to an external source of decision making, and what happens if that connection is no longer there tomorrow?
Right. Yeah. Yes.
Am I then left even more incapacitated than I was before?
Right. Like, God, why have you forsaken me? Kind of
Exactly,
situation. Yeah.
exactly. So in the beginning, it has helped me to deal with the processes I was going through. Over time, with the consistent deliveries and the consistent messages I've been getting from the guides, how our power is individually attained in the present moment, especially when we reach these non dual states,
Hmm.
where our energy is being pulled in from the past, our energy is pulled in from the projections into the future, and it's right now here in the moment. And in the moment, when we are really deeply in it, then we have everything that what could possibly need. In the moment, we're alive. In the moment, we're breathing. In the moment, we're taken care of. There is an energy flow that holds us. That was the greatest trust builder for me of all. Understanding and knowing that the power is truly within me, that I am the creator of my life, and that I don't need to externalize this power outside. And over time, this internalizing of power also brings alignment. The mind starts to align, the heart starts to align, the body starts to align,
Sure.
and I started to make better decisions. I
Mm.
started to make decisions that felt clear yeses and clear nos. Rarely it was a maybe. Even when I walk through the supermarket, I now look at certain things that I want to purchase There are certain instinctual or conditioned ways of buying things in the supermarket. And there are certain ways where I'm just like tuning into this internal alignment I have, and it says yes to this and no to this. And my mind can't really understand, why is this a no? And sometimes I'll get an answer specifically why. And it could be a specific ingredient, or it could be something about the energy that this particular brand holds.
Mm.
But this internal alignment, man, it's changed my life. It's changed my life, the way I move through life. And that is, to some degree, this conscious creator element is, how do I become more consciously creating the reality I ultimately am aligned to? And greater alignment creates a more aligned reality, and less of the things that we create from an unconscious space or subconscious space, or because we have agreements from the past, or because of a collective element. Now, we are part of the collective, which means we're going to move along with the collective through some of these things. There is no real escaping that. But the more of us come into this place of conscious creatorship, the more and more we create a reality that is shaped differently, that is coming from a place of alignment, rather than, oh, my mind thinks it wants this, my heart wants this,
Right.
and my body wants this.
Yeah.
So guides have helped a lot. And people would ask me, so, well, you have a connection to like basically infinite source, infinite information. You must be like consistently asking them all kinds of questions and getting all kinds of answers. And I would say, actually, I've stopped asking questions.
Mm.
And they're like, why do you just stop asking questions? And it's very rare that I actually go into the channel to ask specific questions about my life. And
Interesting.
I would say, when I ask a question and I get an answer, very often the mind has 10 more questions. So it's kind of a rabbit hole, completely unsatisfied mind wanting to know more and more and more and more. And that's not necessarily the place I want to be.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. It's fascinating. And at the start, though, you felt like there was more of a reliance on it, because I feel like there would be a pushback. This thing is starting to come in. It probably feels amazing. You're like, whoa. Then it's like a little bit of ego steps in. Like, look at
Mhm.
me. I get to have
Yep.
conversations with angels.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, let me ask you a bunch of fucking questions. And then it's like, let me even push back on this, because I need to validate the legitimacy of what's coming through, that I'm
Right.
not like losing my goddamn mind over here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, so I could see how like there would be this path of like navigating all that until you like the dust settles and you're like, okay. And then there's like the human part, this wants to come through.
Mm-hmm.
To what extent do I let it? Do I make this my life's work?
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe I want to go be a carpenter, or or whittle some wood on a porch in some small country or somewhere and not talk to anybody. And there is a lot of considerations to make, and also how this stuff was seen and deemed in the past as sorcery or
Sure.
otherwise. But I hope that we've come to a place, because I see more and more channels coming forward, and what it tells me, like everything else that we see in humanity, that it's always been here, that our like religious and spiritual work
Mm-hmm.
came from this work.
Mm-hmm.
The Vedantas for Indian culture, it's well known, meditated channeled experiences, and you could say the same thing about the Bible, the Torah, and every other really great book.
Absolutely.
Human Design, Gene Keys, all these are channelers channeling stuff. Every invention on planet Earth, as Cryon likes to say, is an intervention, not an invention. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Given it's like you always see all these inventions coming up, just like AI now at the same time, quantum computing, same time. It's like, because the information is being given, and those who have the resource or the attunement to pick up on those streams just bring that through. And it seems to be how everything else in nature works. How bees work, ants work. Like, and if you take time to look at any cohort species that lives together, they seem to have different jobs. I learned the wildest thing about bees that I had never heard before. Can I share this with you?
Of course.
This just blew my freaking mind. Like, they do so many spectacular things, but I was like, wait, I'm sorry, what now? So there's a point where the queen bee is coming of age, and she's getting weak and potentially dying. And so the bees come together and actually choose when the next queen bee is to be born. This is not something that nature gives. I mean, it is, but because it's nature. But like, they come together as a cohort and decide to do this together, and they begin to create these pheromones, and then they will create a single, it's a hexagon, right? That they're creating, hexagon, octagon. They're creating one that's bigger. They're just one. They will create that's bigger than the rest, because the queen bee, when she's born, needs additional space. And
Mm,
so when they decide together, somehow through this pheromone exchange, a single bee is chosen, and that bee is literally given the right to be the queen bee, which
mm,
is now after she's born, if the eldest queen bee hasn't passed yet, she can still challenge for that spot, and they will fight to the death to see who's the going to be the caretaker of the bees. Just blew my mind. I was like, wait, what? They choose it. It's not like just randomly born into the society. Like, they come together and they actually make a conscious choice. So when you're speaking about, I do think the number one asset we have is our attention. And
mm,
there's clearly a lot of things vying for our awareness in this world in a lot of different ways. And these cycles of momentum that you're speaking about are just strictly things that we haven't taken our attention off. Because in my opinion, the areas where I heal the most is where I acknowledge that something is there. I don't bypass, because like I totally agree. There's like an energy of like, I'm watching, but I'm not holding it tightly. Like,
mhm,
as a healer, what I've learned is I can have all the intention in the world to want to heal you. Like, I want you to heal, but at the same time, I need to completely let go and like not want it at the same time. It's this weird paradox, right?
mm,
Of like, I want to heal you, but I have no responsibility for that. Like, let's see what happens, because it's not even up to me. There's a orchestration here, a divine intelligence, call it what you will. And everywhere we look, doesn't matter where you look, you will see that like coming to homeostasis is the nature of this energy, the nature of this consciousness. You cut your finger, it repairs itself. You break a bone, it repairs itself. A woman gets pregnant, nobody has to give any direction on how to do that. We
mhm,
leave nature alone, it self-corrects and organizes, right? So it's like there's us needing to understand that things need our awareness, but they also need to be left alone simultaneously. And everywhere in my life where I have enough courage to hold it loosely and not intervene are usually the places where things take off or get a lot of flow, or suddenly serendipity kind of takes hold. And so when you're saying that I hear that what we get to learn as a human society is how to channel that awareness from that centeredness. And when the collective does that, there are seriously hallmark moments in humanity where you can see big, indescribable changes happening. And P.S., our government is aware of this. These tests have been long done by the CIA. I think there was like a very famous study from like 10 or 20 years ago where I believe DC was the number one murder capital in the world at that time, and especially over the summers, it would increase. And the CIA had figured out what's the energy output of a single human being in terms of the power of intention when they meditate. Like, they actually like quantified this,
mhm,
and so they wanted to lower the murder rate by like, it was something like 44%. I could be making that number up, by the way, because all statistics are generally made up on the spot. As we know, 63.2% of all statistics are made up on the spot. And so they knew that if they get together a certain amount of people and meditate on lowering the murder rate, their hypothesis is it would lower by like 44%. And that summer they did that, and it lowered by 44%.
mm,
So that's the thing. I'm like, I don't know where my question here is, but I can see a path towards transformative change in the way that you see it. It's like the individual reshapes the ocean, the individual, little piece of water in there reshapes the way that the ocean moves. And I really do hope that I feel deeply in my system. Otherwise, what's all this work for if I didn't believe that that's where we were going?
yeah. I mean, it's really fascinating. you know, we have so much power that we are not applying, or it's applied unconsciously or
Yeah.
subconsciously. And there is incredible amount of conscious creator power that is accessible and available to us. But it starts even with the smallest things. Just how conscious are my thoughts?
Hmm.
How conscious are my emotions? And how conscious am I of my physical body? Those are like very tiny steps where conscious creatorship starts. Everyone thinks about the glamorous, I'm going to manifest $1 million, so I'm like abundant for life, right? With no regard to consequences and understanding how interdependence operates in like collective consciousness and what kind of impact it may have to me if I just have, $1 million like from one day to another day, right? So there are many ways to become more consciously aware and become conscious creator. And it's different than from intentionally creating. And what I mean with that is an intention can be established by the mind and the mind's operations.
Hmm.
And that can be very limited. And it can be based on trauma, right? I want $1 million because, I grew up in a poor household and I didn't like it. And that left me with a trauma and I need that money to feel safe.
Sure.
Here we go again, the safety element. So conscious creatorship is so much more. It's a wider lens through which all of the different pieces are being addressed. And in this like 5-6 weeks that we're going to go through it, the guides are basically addressing different parts of our being to get to a place where we have a greater alignment and we start to create conscious thoughts and conscious emotions and conscious actions. And that starts to shape our life first, and it starts to shape our immediate environment, and it starts to shape further environments in co-creation. So that is, I believe, one of the most powerful ways to evolve as a human being and to impact humanity. That's what I believe.
I agree.
And
I
I
agree.
think the studies you're talking about were the Maharishi effect. The Maharishi Institute did a bunch of studies over the last, maybe since the 70s.
Sure.
And uh, we have even some transcendental meditation, teachers that are within our community that have been within that organization and have been part of some of these studies. And it's really fascinating because those studies formed a way of thinking about the effect and the outside impact a human being can have that is in a meditative state.
That's right.
The frequency that we hold changes our environment.
Hmm.
And that's something to be cherished, explored, and in my perspective, in my personal life, committed to. Because this is how I can truly make change happen. As simple as it sounds, the change you're seeking is the change within.
Yeah. I started thinking about the mind, even how we distinguish the subconscious mind, and like you said, the heart, and all these aspects that want different things. P.S. If you have any time limitations, let me know. Um, I started thinking of them as just more in a dimensional field versus a distinction of how we think or felt sense. But I'm like, these are different dimensions of reality because human beings are clearly multidimensional creatures that are being informed from that particular dimension. And we seem to have all these different antennas and tools that can pick up on these different aspects of these fields. I think, you are probably a much more advanced soul in that respect in terms of where the data stream is coming through. Maybe advanced is the wrong word, but I think people get what I mean here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I don't know why that's helped me because then it was less about reprogramming the subconscious mind or what does my heart really want. It's just like tuning into that that actual dimension, and I don't know why that empowers me. Like I love the idea of being a multidimensional creature, and I don't remember I think it's called Empire University or something like that. I may again misquoting this, but they have been testing DMT over there, like smoking DMT over there. And what they have discovered is, DMT is typically like a 10 to 12 minute long experience, but if you change the composition and you do it as an IV, they can do it for you can be in that experience for about an hour. That's what they discovered over there. And the reason they did that is because the experience is such a blast off for anybody who's ever done it. You know what I mean? It's like you're here and then you're not, right? Like the material world evaporates and you go through what people describe as like the tunnel of light, and you end up somewhere that's indescribable. And so you're there, and then you come back, and you don't know where you were, and you don't know how long it's been since you were gone for. And so they did that because they want people to be able to regulate their nervous systems while they're there and like stabilize and be there. But a phenomenal thing happened in this discovery, which is they realized that the entities that people are meeting are all the same. As if you're altering the frequency of the body. And so where you end up is a dimension where it's not different entities that people are meeting. They're meeting the same entities. And I was like, whoa, that's really interesting. And so it almost kind of proves to some extent that the mind is a sort of antenna that, like a radio station, you can change the station and then you end up in this other place, which I think speaks to channeling, because often when you take psychedelics, you do feel like a channel. There's this guidance and insight and voices that come to speak to you. And so, to some way, it's like you are showing humanity a way forward into, because we all need to see it to believe it. Tony Hawk hits the 900 a year later. A 12-year-old is doing it. Bannister runs the 4-minute mile. A few weeks later, a guy's doing it in Australia.
Exactly.
There's something about that in humanity where it's like, and I think that's what a good part of social media is, when it's not just showing us violence and crazy stuff, is like when you see something extraordinary, it becomes bioavailable to everybody. And so I think in a way, you're showing a certain advancement, call a certain evolution, X-Men mutation, whatever you want to call it, that like, hey, we all have this capacity, because I know I can track people's nervous systems, which is a skill I acquired through this work, or gained through this work, tracking my own energy body, tracking other people's energy body. And when I say that to people, they're like, what? But I'm like, it's true. I can feel what's in your body. I can feel what your body's doing. And I'm like, and I know for a fact that it's not a gift that I was given. I know it's a skill that human beings have that hasn't been cultivated. And so I say that because for me, that exploration of being multidimensional, and then like exploring, not trying to understand my heart, but like, what's the dimension of my heart? What's the dimension of subconscious? And then like, how does that really inform? Because it seems to drive so much of who we are, what we are, and the quality of our lives. That's a dimension I want to spend a lot of time in.
Yes.
And get very related to, and then have a really healthy relationship with, instead of an antagonistic one.
Yes, absolutely. And here's the one thing that I'm wondering about. It's, we could have just continued the way we've been continuing, like manifesting things to learn about things and go to realizations. But here is a seemingly benevolent and powerful source of information, energy, and adjustments that is supporting us to activate something that's within us, that will empower the individual. And so I'm thinking, wait a second. So if there is great powers to be supporting individuals to be empowered and move through realizations faster, then there is a support to accelerate this evolutionary process, accelerate how we're evolving as humans, individually and as a collective. And to me, that's a great promise. To me, that's a great opportunity. And it's almost like, wow, we are totally blessed. Like, all the time we thought we're not supported, but here we are totally supported. We just have to stop for a moment and just open ourselves to listen. And the support comes.
Yeah. In a world that's moving so fast, the guidance only comes when you're standing still.
That is unfortunately still true after thousands of years.
It's really wild, but it makes sense. It's like, when you're sick, which I believe is a spiritual upgrade experience now, you can't run around and expect to come out of it. You need to be in repose and rest, and so the transformation occurs. And it just seems to be like, if you want access, you got to learn to be able to sit and calm
Mm.
your system down. And a lot of what people seek is certainly not, I would say almost everything that people seek is in learning how to stop meddling and just learning how to sit and listen and be. And 95% of what people deem as problems pretty much take care of themselves.
Yeah. You know, there's so much more I want to talk to you about, but here's a proposal for you.
Sure.
How about while you and Mandy are going through this course, we do something, depending on how long it is. It could be short or it could be longer. Pretty much almost like on a weekly basis to check in, like how you experienced that week's piece or the transformation. And
Okay.
then we can dive a bit deeper into like what are the moments in life you are actually creating from the least amount of effort with the highest amount of impact? What are the times in your life where more synchronicities and opportunities opened when you didn't expect them? What are the times in life where you tried so hard and it just wouldn't? Right? I think these are really important questions to look at and tangle in this, 5, 6 weeks that we're going to be going through.
Yeah, that'd be a great and wonderful case study. I'm sure I could answer for my wife, and as long as time allows in our
Of course.
busy child rearing phase of our lives,
Oh,
yeah, we're happy. I think we are happy to do that, though, and I think it's a investigation, and it's just cool, like anything, to bring more awareness when a process is unfolding.
it's almost like a reality show. It's like
I like
I'm
it.
watching Guy and Mandy transform in
I
reality.
like it a lot. It'd be fun if, like, suddenly I have butterfly wings at the end of it, and we're like, how did that happen?
You already
Uh,
have them.
yeah, I already have. I mean, I kind of, I want to say that I instinctively know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
It's like, no mind is the only way. Anytime my mind's involved or effort is involved, things go to shit.
Mm.
My teacher introduced me to a fun game yesterday where a guy produced like an extra sensory perception, like an ESP type of game. 4 cards on the table, whether it's colors or something,
Mhm.
and then you pick.
Mhm.
But it's like, you can feel when you get it right. It's like the mind can't be involved at all.
Mhm.
It's the kind of, like you said, when you're in
So how
alignment.
do you operate the human body without the mind getting involved?
But it's this weird thing when you really tune in to that stream, because then you get one right, and then the mind's like, "See,"
Yeah, exactly.
and then it tries to take the power, and
Yeah.
it feels like surfing energy, but when it's clean, you can really feel it, and it
Mm.
hits every time, and there's a feedback loop that happens as you hit it. But then you watch the mind trying to take its little role, and I could see how, in this moment where you bring so much presence to this practice, you can feel the micro nuances of it. But how often is that happening in our lives? Probably moment by moment, you know
Sweet. Well, it's been a pleasure as
always.
always, and I love the way you frame things and the way you bring, very specific examples in your life. And yeah, it's just, a true pleasure to be doing this with you
Likewise.
and serving in the world while we're also going through our own roller coasters.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. I, as a voice for people around the world who follow your work, as a both a practitioner and a teacher in my own right, I have a sense of what it takes to continuously show up and be of service to people. So just a great many million thank yous to you for your acts of courage, for your willingness to be a teacher, for your willingness to do the weird and make it normal, and yeah, just for your work, for your soul, for your family, for everything that's led to this moment. And I hope, even in our lifetimes, one day we're standing at the top of a mountain together, just in complete awe of the transformative experiences that we got to see in this lifetime. I'm sure we'll experience it in other lifetimes as well. But specifically in this one, with this generation seeming to be this extremely important bridge from what was to what is becoming. So yeah, thank you a million times over again for being that person.
100%. And thank you so much, Guy. Well, I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday.
In a few days.
It's gonna be a rocket ship.
All right, buddy.
Yes.
I love you so much.